Okay, this is the new Mazda CX-30. It's an all-new addition to Mazda's SUV lineup, and it sits between the CX-3 and the CX-5. Now, I know the question you're already thinking, why not just call it a CX-4? Well, there's actually a car in China that Mazda sells called the CX-4, so that's why they've gone with the CX-30 name.
Well, that's reason number one for the CX-30 name. Reason number two is to indicate that, underneath, it's based on the all-new Mazda 3, whereas the CX-3 that it operates in the same class as is based on the smaller Mazda 2. Now, the reason this is so important is because the new 3 sits on an entirely new platform with completely different suspension and, eventually, a revolutionary new engine, that being the compression ignition Skyactiv X petrol engine, although that's still a little while off, so you'll have to stay tuned for that. It's also important because the new 3 is positioned as a more premium alternative to most mainstream hatchbacks. It's not quite on the same level as, say, a BMW 1 Series, but sits with the Volkswagen Golf atop the offerings from mainstream brands. As such, the CX-30 is positioned as being a more premium alternative to the small SUV offerings from other mainstream brands, as well as to its own CX-3. Given that, it has a considerably higher starting price than the budget CX-3, although it is still under the 30 grand mark for the pure model, while it tops out at over 43,000 for the most expensive variant, the fully spec'd Astina. The entry G20 drivetrain, which features a 2-litre naturally aspirated petrol engine with front-wheel drive, is available across the range, and that's what's on test here, but you can up that to a 2.5-litre engine, the G25, with either front or all-wheel drive in the top 2 trims. With the CX-30 you see here sporting the base engine and top Astina trim, you're looking at 38,990 as tested.
And this being the top of the range model, it is incredibly well equipped, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that the new Mazda 3 that it's based on is very well equipped.
As such, the same semi-digital gauge cluster and slick new infotainment system from the 3 still feature, the latter of which does boast smartphone mirroring and navigation, but lacks a touchscreen and relies solely on a rotary dial controller. It also has dual zone climate control, heated seats and a heated steering wheel, power adjustment and memory for the driver's seat, a proper head-up display, auto windows all around, a Bose sound system, and even a powered tailgate, so it's certainly not lacking in any real way. The quality of the interior materials is also truly outstanding, from the classy lashings of brown leather across the dashboard to the seat upholstery that features orange inside the perforations to make the black leather look brown when viewed from a distance. Everything feels really high class, with many of the well-padded surfaces reminding me of what you'd find in a Lexus. The design overall is beautifully minimalist too, and serves up plenty of storage space and enough room to stretch out. The curvaceous, line-free exterior design is worth mentioning also, as I think this thing's a real looker, even with the chunky black plastic cladding.
But the biggest point of difference between the CX-30 and the Mazda SUVs positioned either side of it is in the way that it drives, and that all comes down to the Mazda 3 platform that it's based on. Once again, we come back to that, but here's why it's especially important that this is based on the Mazda 3 here. You still have independent suspension up front, but they swapped out the more sophisticated multi-link setup that you previously got in favour of a torsion beam. Now, that of course means that the wheels at the back can't operate independently of each other anymore. They're connected with one solid axle, and it does mean that you don't have quite as good chassis control in the rear when you hit mid-corner bumps, which in other countries where you actually have decent roads, this won't be a problem. But here in Australia, with tree-lined roads like I'm driving down at the moment, it's a big deal having that sort of body control over mid-corner bumps like that, and you can feel a little bit of, I guess, shakiness from the rear end when you do hit a bump as you send it into a corner. The front end still feels really confident because, as I said, it's independent suspension and the new Mazda 3 handles really well, so obviously this does too. It's a bit taller and a bit heavier, so there's a little bit of body roll. It's not quite as sharp, but it is totally pleasant in every way. But for the most part, you don't really notice any extra bumpiness or anything like that from that torsion beam in the back. So it's not really the end of the world that they have switched to that setup. But why would they go to an old school torsion beam away from sophisticated multi-link is the question I'm sure you're wondering if you know the difference between multi-link suspension and a torsion beam. Well, the reason that Mazda suggests is road noise. This used to be a bit of a bugbear with some previous generation Mazda models, particularly the 3. All their smaller cars suffered from it more than the bigger SUVs. But that's why they went to the torsion beam, because it actually reduced road noise fairly significantly. And I'll tell you what, it is a lot quieter in here as a result. So I've got to agree with them that I guess it was the right decision. Obviously, it's not the best for when it comes to ride and handling, but in terms of lowering road noise and making it just a nicer car to be in, it's totally fine for it. Yeah, I mean, it goes between these corners really nicely. It doesn't necessarily have the performance of some of the more premium stuff out there, since you can't get this with a turbocharged engine. I understand why you can't get it with a turbocharged engine, because then there wouldn't be as much point to buying a CX-5 Turbo instead of this. And, well, this little car with that big turbo engine would be a real riot. I'd actually rather see that engine end up in the Mazda 3 than this, if I'm being honest. But even without having that big turbo engine, I would say if you get the 2.5, front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive doesn't really matter, but if you get the 2.5 litre version of this, you'll definitely have the performance to back everything else up. This 2 litre, as I said, while it's alright in the Mazda 3, it's not quite as punchy in this. It could be a lot worse. It could definitely be a lot worse. But yeah, it's just lacking a little bit when you really want to get on it. It's okay, but it's not going to put you in the back of your seat or anything like that.
Aside from the disappointing lack of power from the base 2-litre engine, there's still a lot to like about the CX-30. It's a great all-rounder. Practical, comfortable, surprisingly agile, and attractive inside and out, it nails the premium feel brief in all ways but performance. Given how much cheaper it is than any of its upscale Euro-badged equivalents, however, it's easy to forgive it for that, especially if you opt for the bigger engine. There's a little bit of room for improvement, and it is only early days for the CX-30 after all, with the Skyactiv X engine variants still yet to come, but even as it sits, there's a lot to like about this thing.